Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staton with you, and today we're joined by a very special guest. Danny Kelly from The Ringer is here, the brilliant Danny Kelly. Great to have him with us. And if you have any questions for either of us, post them in the live chat on the YouTube stream. We'll try and get to some of those. We'll put some up on the screen as well, and you can join in too. So, Danny, we've got an awful lot to squeeze in.
Yeah.
Let's start with free agency. What do you make of Seattle's edition so far? Reminder for everybody, if you've been asleep for the last couple of days, Akello Witherspoon is in at cornerback, yep. Gerald Everett is in, and Gabe Jackson is in as well.
Yeah, I actually like what they've done. It started out slow, and I think you have to count not trading Russell Wilson as a move that they did, at least so far, and so that's good. I think that's a positive for the Seahawks organization. But yeah, I think I really liked the move to go get Gabe Jackson in that trade for a 5th round pick. I think that makes a ton of sense. Like, has been one of the better pass blocking guards in the NFL during his career. Didn't have to give up a ton to do it. I mean, like, think about 5th round picks. It's really just a coin flip, I think. And so getting a guy that you can use like as a starter this year and for the next couple of years, potentially, I think that was really good value for them. And then, you know, the Everett one, I think is a little bit boom bust, but I think he's a good player. I think he has the opportunity to come in and be like the number 3 guy. Last year, I feel like we saw the offense. Part of the reason I think the offense struggled down the stretch is because Lockett didn't really look like himself. And so getting another, you know, I don't know if I'd call him dependable, but another playmaking type of guy that can come in and is not, you know, sort of an unproven guy. I think remember last year we were like, oh, is Josh Gordon going to come in and like be what we need right now? You know, they don't have to like rely on that kind of thing. Freddie Swain maybe is not going to be playing major snaps next season. So I think I really liked Everett. He's the guy I had on in my mind prior to free agency and over just the last couple of years. He's the type of player I think who's been close to breaking out a few different times during his career. And then for whatever reason, like there's one point where he was starting to really establish himself and he got hurt. And that kind of like threw things off. And then, you know, you saw Higbee kind of like take over that role. And so he just didn't really get it back. And I think he's a really good player who his best football could be ahead of him. And I think, you know, this is a smart, cheap 1 year, $6 million. He knows Waldron's offense, so in theory, he can hit the ground running. I like it a lot. Good on play action, good after the catch. So overall, pretty positive. I actually am kind of surprised. I didn't go into yesterday feeling pretty good about it, but yesterday I came out of it feeling good.
Now, this will make you feel even better, Danny, from a Seahawks perspective. Joe Flacco is visiting with the San Francisco 49ers right now. So there you go. And Mitch Trubisky is signed with the Bills, which is quite interesting.
Yep.
We had a question that I just showed up on the screen a moment ago, which was, do you feel a bit better about the cost? Because my initial reservation was $6 million for Gerald Everett. I like Everett, and I think, like everybody else, I kind of suggested he would be a good target because of the obvious Shane Waldron connection. But I was sort of thinking maybe 3 years, $15 million with a low year 1 cap hit, and it's $6 million 1 year prove it deal type thing. But then when you see, I haven't got the exact numbers for Kyle Rudolph, but they kind of just flipped onto my Twitter timeline before we started, and they're quite substantial. And Jared Cook, who's a lot older than Gerald Everett, and is very much in the past his best, slightly 1 year only kind of deal, he's also getting quite a lot of money. And I think, relatively speaking, I think the Gerald Everett deal does look a lot better a day on than maybe it did initially when it's at $6 million and they haven't got a lot to spend.
Even when, I think that's absolutely right. Kyle Rudolph, I'm looking at it, 2 years, $16 million. I don't know. This is obviously on its face value, so you can't really necessarily believe that. But, you know, I think relatively speaking, especially also when you look at like the Jonnu Smith contract, which was 30 something million guaranteed, you could make the argument that Everett is a much better value. They're not like, I would take Jonnu Smith, you know, if it was 1-to-1, but if we're talking about the differences in the price, I think I would probably lean Everett in that situation. If there's a similar type of player. The other thing I think I like about Everett versus, and this is like the thing we had last year with Greg Olsen, you know, where they're spending a good chunk of change to get a guy like Olsen, who in my mind isn't a creator necessarily. He's a cog in the machine, I could see. And I think Everett has the ability to be a creator. Like if you've seen him run after the catch, he's very dynamic. So it's not just Russell Wilson getting him the ball, 7 yards downfield and then the guy falling down kind of deal with you see a lot of tight ends. I think he's a kind of guy who can really add value, I think, to the offense. So I'm excited about that one. I think, like you said, in retrospect, the price looks much better now after we've seen both the Cook and the Rudolph, deals and how much they cost.
Initially, when I was kind of reflecting on the first two real big moves, because no disrespect to Akilla Witherspoon, it's a nice little signing, $4 million. I kind of feel like the Everett and Jackson deals were the ones that fans had been waiting for. And it was $15 million for the pair. And my first thought, Danny, was, wow, that's quite expensive, especially when you sort of look on Spot Track or over the cap and you see that Gabe Jackson's on the hook for $9.35 million. I was thinking, well, it'll be on about 5 or 6. And then you see that and say, oh, it's quite a bit more expensive than I initially thought. But then having slept on it, I woke up today and my feeling was, okay, if this is just the start, and I think it was Jeff Simmons actually on Twitter, speaking to Joe Fan, who suggested maybe what this will do is it will just sort of make everything else fall into place. If they feel like they had to get a left guard and they had to get a tight end, now that they've done that, now they can really go and attack the value in free agency, then I think this could potentially be a good offseason for the Seahawks, because I don't think they had a good one last year, because I think they were so stuck waiting for Jadeveon Clowney, and then were so stuck needing to fix the pass rush, and it dragged on and on and on, and it dragged into the draft, which meant they had to trade up for Darrell Taylor, and it stalled everything. And I think perhaps with these moves yesterday, they've avoided that happening again. And now they can go, okay, we've done that. Here's what we can restructure and create, or maybe trade somebody to get some more cap space, or we can extend someone's contract to create some cap space. Now perhaps the Seahawks can go and get the value that is sat there in free agency. And that's what I'd like to see. There are some really good receivers still out there. Can you get a really dynamic third receiver? Can you fix your pass rush with a couple of really solid additions? Obviously, center's still perhaps a need. Personally, I'd love to see Richard Sherman come back as well. If there's any chance of that whatsoever, Bobby Wagner has been doing his best, I think, and Andre Diggs and everybody like that. If there's I'd like them to really go for it and have an off season like 2013, because they don't have many draft picks, Danny. I don't know if they're going to gain any more between now and then. And this feels like their only real chance to set themselves up for a push in 2021 is right here, right now, in free agency.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I imagine like a Will Fuller on a 1-year deal, stretching the field opposite Lockett, opposite DK. They could put Lockett in the slot. I think that would be really interesting. Even Juju would be interesting, just because I think it would give Russell Wilson another guy in the middle of the field. And I think referencing that 2013 offseason where, the free agency kind of just fell perfectly for the Seahawks with Bennett and Averill, and those guys, I think they both started on 1-year deals, right? It was like both prove it style deals, and then they earned long-term deals with the Seahawks. And
Averill was 2 years and Bennett was 1.
Oh, that's right. Correct. But yeah, I mean, I think, depending on how teams are kind of like treating this, there's a lot of teams I think that are afraid to go big on the cap this year, just because it's down, versus all these other seasons recently when it's just constantly gone up. And so maybe that would give the Seahawks a chance to do this. I agree with you though. Like, it's a good start and I feel pretty good about it right now. But they need to still, maybe they bring Dunlap back on a cheaper deal. I don't even know the secondary, like, who are any receivers sort of on your radar, like besides like the big name guys? I don't really know, like, if there's anyone I'd get too excited about outside, like Juju or.
This is the problem, Danny. I've had my head turned by the attractive receiver options, the big names. Just like you, I'm thinking, oh, Will Fuller, gets downfield.
Yeah.
Imagine a game against the Rams, and it's like, well, okay, Jalen Ramsey, you can go and cover DK Metcalf because, Tyler Lockett's free and Gerald Everett's free, and you've got Will Fuller streaking downfield. That would be very, very attractive. And there hasn't been any talk with Will Fuller. There has with Juju, with whether the Steelers are going to try and make a push there. Kenny Galladay's obviously meeting with the Giants. But with Will Fuller, it's very quiet. I don't know if that's the injury situation or whatever, but
yeah,
I would have thought, and Rob, this is why I want them to go, hey, Russ, let's sort this out. Let's come together and have a kiss and make up here. Because if I'm Will Fuller and I'm kicking around at home and Russell Wilson rings me up and says, well, come and play with me for a year, that would be very, very appealing. Much more appealing than if the Bears ring you up and say, the Red Rifle wants to be throwing footballs to you next year. So I think you'd be better off kind of leaning on Russ a little bit, getting things sorted so you can get somebody in there like that and really make this work. And I just love the thought of going into next season, Danny, with so many options. Having like an assortment of options and receivers and targets so that you can really get after this thing and have a great year.
Yep. I'm absolutely with you. I'm actually looking through the receivers now because I think I'm on the same page as you. I was just sort of awestruck by some of the top names, but running through a few of these, like T.Y. Hilton, maybe I could see that, field stretching type guy. It'd be hilarious if they tried to bring Golden Tate back. I don't see that happening, but it'd be hilarious.
That might be one if Wilson gets dealt.
Yeah, seriously. There's not a lot. There's not a lot out there. I think,
Sammy Watkins, I mean, he'd have to be cheap, though. He's kind of always, Sammy Watkins, the idea of Sammy Watkins is always better than Sammy Watkins.
Exactly. I don't know. T.Y., I'm kind of interested in that now. Tim Patrick is another guy who I've always kind of liked with Denver, who he's like a huge catch radius guy, really long, really tall, big playmaker. He's always played well for them when he's gotten the opportunities, but he's been stuck behind like bigger names. And so I think that he could be another option to kind of keep in mind. But I'm with you. I feel like last year I remember them really having to like delve deep down their depth chart. Like Hollister was like a big target on third downs, and it would just drive me crazy. I'm like, man, is that really the best option that you have on this crucial third down is to like throw it to Jacob Hollister? Like, no offense to Hollister, kind of some offense to Hollister, I guess maybe, but that was just like, man, this drives me crazy. And then you got like Freddie Swain playing major snaps. Philip Dorsett and Josh Gordon, I think, were in their plans, but neither of those guys ended up playing. So I'm with you. Getting the depth and having it be almost like redundant would be nice, because then you have all these options. If Lockett gets banged up, DK gets banged up, they're not going to lose so much of their steam like they did last year, I feel like.
And I just want to see some. I always felt like the Seahawks under Carroll were a team that would try every single year. And you saw it, Sheldon Richardson trade right before the season, and Dwayne Brown mid-season, and Clowney before the 2019 season. And some of the moves that they made, Danny, you always kind of felt like they're going for it. They are really going for this.
Yeah.
And then last year, I kind of felt like, well, I don't really understand what the plan was there. It all seemed a bit like they put all of their eggs in the Clowney basket. And then when that all went a bit sour, they couldn't pivot to a plan B, which made a great deal of sense. And it all kind of spiraled a little bit. And I just like to see, look, there are so many teams out there. How the heck have the Rams managed to get themselves into a situation where they're like a bajillion dollars over the cap, and yet they just announced a $40-odd million deal with Leonard Floyd? I mean, if the Rams can do that, then it's time for the Seahawks to take a leaf out of their book and just go, hey, look, we don't have to go crazy. We don't have to kill ourselves 3 years down the line with the cap here. But you can, I think there's $58 million of movable cap space on the roster this year, and you have about $100 million to spend next year.
Yeah.
Could you just steal a little $20 million here or something, and backload some of these deals a little bit so that you have low year one cap hits, so you can get some of the things that we're talking about, so that Seahawks fans, if it is going to be a draft with 3 picks, at least off the back of this sort of free agency period, you could go in thinking they have a chance this year.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there's actually, and with that in mind, like there's some good veteran pass rushers out there too. I think, like, I was just looking at this list. Like, I don't know if Jarrell Casey still has it. He's still out there. Carlos Dunlap, Justin Houston, Ryan Kerrigan. I think he's kind of an interesting idea. They don't necessarily need interior guys, but Sue is still a free agent. Everson Griffin, I think, is still out there. There's guys that they can bring in, and it's not necessarily like a long-term plan, but it's guys that can help in year one, like, and get them over the hump a little bit from where they have been. I feel like they've been a good team that would need to really like overachieve what they actually are to like do anything to get far in the playoffs. And maybe that's not like the best way they can do it. Like get that over that hump and add a couple guys that can make this team like really good. And honestly, going to the Russell Wilson thing, like I think the Gabe Jackson, the Gerald Everett, it's like a good start. And we always talk about how Russell Wilson was sitting there watching Tom Brady win the Super Bowl with, a team that did like exactly what we're talking about, brought in a few guys for Brady. There's not like they're super expensive guys, but they like were key cogs that Brady felt were important, like the Gronks, the Antonio Brown, although he wasn't as big of a factor as maybe we thought he'd be, but he was there too. And I think the Seahawks could make a few more of those type of moves where you're just you're improving your depth. It is taking away a little bit from the long-term plan, but I mean,
a 70-year-old head coach.
Yeah, so much can happen in a year. That's the thing, is like they're almost too frugal and disciplined about the long-term factors that it's like, man, think a little short term.
On the one hand, they'll go and spend what they spent on Jamal Adams, and then the next minute they're like, well, we can't possibly afford Joe Tooney, and it's like,
yeah.
It's kind of like very inconsistent the way they do it. I just keep thinking back to the Green Bay move a couple of years ago with the two Smiths, Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith. And Green Bay were paying Aaron Rodgers. They were paying other players on their roster. It's not like they had $70 million to spend like the Jets currently have. They had some work to get those deals under the cap, and they brought in two really good pass rushers who helped elevate the defense and get them back on track. And then they obviously drafted Rashaad Gary, but didn't do much as a rookie. But they really sort of invested in that area. And I'd like to see something similar. I don't think you're necessarily going to have to spend what the Packers spent on the two Smiths to get Dunlap, for example, and another. I mean, even if it was just Dunlap and Benson Mayowa, and you got a bit more from some of the guys currently on the roster, I don't think it'd be the end of the world. But personally, I'd quite like to see if they could get another better option to bookend Dunlap, because I kind of feel like we know what we're getting from Rasheed Green and LJ Collier. I think they're quite limited. So could you do that? Can you spend a bit on Dunlap? Can you spend a bit on a receiver? And if you do those two things, I think that, do you know what? Seahawks fans could legitimately think, well, this is a step forward from last year. And I think that would be some kind of progress. I know it's kind of like as soon as you start talking about the running back position, people kind of start cowering behind the couch. But how do you sort of feel about it? Because we've just seen one big deal for Kenyon Drake going to Las Vegas to be the backup running back. It's $11 million guaranteed for a backup running back there, and they're already spending, I think, $3.5 million on another running back behind Jacobs. How do you think this will impact the market for a Chris Carson or a Leonard Fournette, who I guess, Fournette has been linked to the Seahawks. Yeah. Carson has obviously been with the Seahawks. They're the two names to focus on. There are others. I mean, Philip Lindsay might be an option. Yeah. Who knows? Is he a perfect fit for Seattle? Is he a better fit for the Niners? I'm not sure. But overall, how would you approach that position? I quite like Mike Davis as well. I think that there are one or two in the draft that are good, but ultimately they only have 3 picks. So you're going to have to not draft one of these positions. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think if they're going to do anything, I would rather spend a little bit more on Chris Carson than go out and spend, like if you're going to pay Chris Carson, I'd rather pay Chris Carson $7 million than Fournette $6 million, if that makes sense. I don't know like what the actual gulf is going to be, but like I'd rather they don't sort of skimp on, the last little bump to get Chris Carson back versus going out and getting a guy like Fournette. I just think Carson's a better player at this point and more dynamic, more of a creator. Fournette. The interest in Fournette is a little bit weird to me because I don't think he does anything that's like so much better than what number one, I don't think he's better than Chris Carson. Number two, I don't know like what he brings to your offense. It's like you should have just kept Carlos Hyde. You know what I mean? So that one's a little bit weird. And I'm a Fournette fan. I just don't think he is what people thought he was going to be, and I don't know if that is going to move the needle at all really for this offense. And so I would probably be disappointed if they do end up doing that and letting Chris Carson go. Just looking at some of these other options like James Conner. No, he looked pretty cooked. I don't think there's going to be enough dumb teams like the Raiders to get it for Carson or Fournette to get like big deals. You know what I mean? I just don't. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of spots for these guys to land. Maybe I'll end up being wrong, and Chris Carson will sign for a big deal, but it doesn't feel like either of those guys have a very strong market, and so that might actually lead the Seahawks being able to bring back Chris Carson for cheaper than they thought. So I'm kind of just holding out hope for that. And if they don't, I don't know. How do you feel about Penny? I'm very on the fence about Penny.
I've kind of written Rashaad Penny. I will happily be proven wrong. I feel like I've kind of almost written him off at this point. And if they get anything out of him, it'll be a plus
house money
this year. Yeah. I mean, Fournette's a really strange player, actually, when you think about it, because at LSU, he looked like the next Marshawn Lynch.
Right.
And watching him, there's a reason. Look, I know people will say he shouldn't have gone at number 4, and that's been proven to be the case in his career. But there was still a lot to like. There was still a reason why our team decided we're going to take this guy that early. And it's because he did show an awful lot at LSU. And then when you actually look at his stats, it's so strange because he started off fairly reasonably. He had like 1,300 all-purpose yards, and he had 10 touchdowns as a rookie, and then had a bit of a injury hit, I think, second season, or was it because he was in the doghouse? Can't remember. Then his third season, again, he had something like 1,700 total yards and touchdowns. And then then he gets cut, and then he's in Tampa Bay, and you think, well, that's a big opportunity for him. But again, he always kind of felt like a bit of a bit part player until the very end when he was in the playoffs. And part of me looks at him, Danny, and thinks, well, they've done this before with Marshawn Lynch, a highly drafted player who lost his way. It was maybe a bit of a headache for a lot of teams, but Pete Carroll just brings him under his wing and he delivers on his potential. But then part of me thinks, is lightning very likely to strike twice?
Right,
is Leonard? I mean, the great thing about Marshawn is that he was a culture setter, really. I mean, he elevated everything. The LOB played off Marshawn, and I don't think Leonard Fournette has got that within him. I think he's just a guy in that sense, and he may be a bit of a handful without the culture setting part of it, if to put it that way. So I'm intrigued to see what they do, though, because they do need our running. I think they need to add somebody. I mean, even if they just end up bringing back Mike Davis, I don't think they're the worst thing in the world. I think Mike Davis gets a bit of a raw deal because he's just some guy who bounced around a little bit. But if you needed someone to get your yards and be explosive and can do a bit in the passing game, I'm not really quite sure why they let him go, especially because then they just spent the first round pick on Penny. It did feel a little bit like wouldn't you have just been better having Mike Davis?
Penny thing. Oh my God. The Penny pick in retrospect was so terrible.
Yeah. Especially because like if you're going to go running back, like they might as well just take a Nick Chubb. I mean, who was the idea? It was like the perfect profile for them. And then there was a tweet from Lance Zierlein a few, I want to say weeks ago, probably months ago now. And he basically pointed out the Seahawks absolutely regret that so much that they didn't take Nick Chubb. Mm-hmm. I'm not surprised, but anyway, so
brutal.
A lot of free agency talk. It's exciting. I think it's more exciting than last year. So let's see what happens here. I'm just waiting for Schefter to tweet. Seahawks have pulled off, a great signing of some description, and we can all sit there and go, this is it. I hope it's not just going to go quiet for 2 weeks now, and we're going to be sat here wondering what's going on, because that's not quite as keen on that. So
I'm with you.
We've got a few questions. I want to get at these questions, Danny, before we move on to a bit about Russell Wilson, because I think that's a totally different topic, and it'll give people a chance to switch off when we talk about Russell Wilson, because people are sick to death of it. But we're talking about it anyway. We're going in the deep end. So let's get through some of these questions. So here's one from Coltrane. What is Seattle's biggest need still in free agency? Getting a center or a running back? Personally, for me, Danny, I think center is quite strong in the draft. So I'm not overly concerned about that. I think the pass rush is the biggest need.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess my question would be how are we feeling about corner? I don't feel that concerned about center. In fact, I was looking this up. I remember last year, and I had completely forgotten about this, but Damian Lewis started one game at center. So maybe there's a world in which they try and put him at center or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
I hope not, because he played so well at right guard.
Yeah,
Seahawks, that isn't it? Let's shoehorn him into a different position, having had a great rookie year as a right guard.
I'm with you. But I agree. I think that could be a position they either address in the draft or in secondary free agency or whatever, make a little trade for somebody. I would say either pass rush. Pass rush is by far like the thing on top of my mind. But I think
give a prediction here based off this message from Ryan. I wonder if they'll re-sign Posick and draft someone, and have Posick as like the hedge going into the draft. And then, okay, if it doesn't go right, then they've got the guy they had last year, even though I don't think Posick's season finished that well. But then at least they've got somebody to go into the draft with, and then maybe you target a Quinn Miners or somebody like that in the draft. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm a little concerned about the corner position. I actually am. I think it was the right decision to let Shaq Griffin leave in free agency for what he got. I just, for whatever reason, I never could buy into like Griffin being a top tier corner. Maybe he'll turn into that in his career. But like there was just that like a ball skills or reaction time or something was just not quite right or not quite there with him. And
how about when he said and how about when he said after the Giants game, yeah, we kind of just took him lightly.
God. Yeah, that's not great. Not great.
There was another game where I think he said, yeah, I just kind of fell asleep because they weren't targeting me, and then they did, and then I gave him a touchdown.
Burned or whatever. Yeah. That's not what you want to hear.
What about this? So I agree with you. I think I'd like to see Sherman come home because I think that would get him pumped and jacked. So and plus the dynamic within the locker room with Russell then, because of I get the sense that Sherman is at the head of the table with Doug Baldwin when it comes to the awkward dislike of Russell Wilson. So I don't know. It'd be entertaining. And you often say that the Seahawks are just a great big circus. So
it would be add a big top to that one if we get Sherman signed. That would be hilarious.
What about this question here? Will Fuller worth it with his injury history? That is a concern, I guess.
Is he worth it? I think so. I'm kind of a weird Fuller fan. Like I've always liked him since he came out of Notre Dame, and obviously there are major concerns, both injuries and this PED thing showed pretty not great judgment or whatever. But I think he's the kind of guy who, like DK Metcalf, can kind of change the geometry of how defenses have to play you. It's when this is just anecdotal, but the difference between what Deshaun Watson has done with Will Fuller on the field versus not on the field is astounding. He's like, the EPA is literally like almost double when Fuller is on the field. When he's been on the field in his career, Deshaun Watson's EPA per play is literally like double than when he's not on the field. So, there's obviously a lot of variables that go into that, but I think the way he kind of changes the way that defenses have to play the Seahawks, I mean, imagine him and DK Metcalf like streaking up the sideline, just kind of like makes it very difficult on the defense. So I would be, very into the idea of like a 1-year deal. If Fuller is like, I'm not going to get what I wanted to get this year, I should go and just score 10 touchdowns this season and play with Russell Wilson, I would be into that. I would definitely be into that, even if it costs like $12 million or I don't even know how. It's probably going to cost more than that. I don't know what his market is. I think I saw it was like at least 15, like 14, 15 would be like the market value, but maybe on a 1-year deal in this market with guys not really getting what they thought they're going to get, maybe it'll be a little cheaper.
Question, Danny. Do you ever make anybody call you DK?
Do I ever make people call me that? No.
Because it's, I mean, why wouldn't you want to be called DK when DK Metcalf is?
Yeah. People called me DK in high school a lot. Like that was sort of my nickname. So, but it didn't stick. And now in retrospect, I wish it had, because
it's so DK cool Metcalf, now. It's cool. DK.
Yeah.
We've got a question here from Mr. J. How much money can they make with restructures? How much money do they have left? Well, I think they're actually over the cap now because they've spent 15 million on 2 players and they had 17 million, but then they spent 4 million on Witherspoon, so that would be 19 million, and then they spent 4 million on Poona Ford, which would be 23 million, and then they've signed the fullback today. So chuck another 10 million onto that now. So it's about, I think they're several million over the cap right now. So how much can they make with restructures? I believe there is $58 million of non-guaranteed money on the roster right now. Some of that will be easier to restructure and shift around than others, but certainly you could borrow against the cap next year. That's a lot harder to do if you intend to pay Jamal Adams $18 to $20 million next year. But But if you are going to move things around, and listen, the Russell Wilson situation is not completely resolved yet, and all bets are off if he ends up leaving in the next 12 months. So I would say 58 million, ample to be able to move around and do some stuff and get some guys in. Let's have a couple more questions before we talk about Russ. Darren has got a question about how much do they realistically have remaining. I don't know. How much would you be comfortable borrowing, Danny? It's a difficult question. I'm not a cap expert, really. I don't know if you are.
Same. No.
I mean, if they could pinch 20 million somewhere or trade somebody and get 10 extra, then you'd have more than enough to do whatever you wanted.
The other thing is, and this maybe is a good segue, but like, if they're planning on trading Russell Wilson in the future, you know what I mean? Like, if they're gonna ride this thing out this year, and then from there on, they don't really know how it's gonna go. Like, you could save obviously a lot of money by trading Russell Wilson. So that's another good reason in my mind to just go for it this year. Hopefully, winning the Super Bowl mends everything, and then you can figure it out from there. You can cross that bridge when you get to it. If things go south this year, the offense stinks, and they're basically same old stuff with like Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson. It's just like they don't see eye to eye. Like, then I could see them actually trading Russell Wilson. I don't think it's out of the realm possibility after the season. I don't think it's going to happen this season, but I think after next season, maybe it's it's one of those things where I think Russell Wilson has to be selfish and look at his legacy, and he wants to be one of the all-time greats. And if he doesn't, and this is me speaking from his point of view, if he doesn't see this team, Seahawks, doing everything that they can to like surround him and make him great, then he can move on. No, you're not going to see my abs.
I love that. That's my second favorite comment that we've had.
I haven't seen my abs in a while.
This is the favorite comment though. Seagulls will finish last in the division this year. It's such an insult. They've called the Seahawks the Seagulls. What a barb.
Ouch.
Stings. We'll call this the final question, then we'll get on to Russ. How do we recover draft picks, assuming we don't trade Jamal Adams away now? My thought on Adams is, I think if the Seahawks haven't done this already, then eventually what they will do is they will sit down with Jamal Adams. They will say, this is where we want to go. Jamal Adams will tell them where he wants to go, and either they will meet in the middle or they will move on. I don't think they're going to drag this out forever and ever and ever and have an ugly set two on holdouts and stuff like that. I think if the Seahawks say 16 and Adams says 20, can they get it somewhere where they're both comfortable, or will the Seahawks start at 14 and him start at 20 and they get it down to 16? I don't know. But if you're Jamal Adams right now, how can you look at the safety market and see what players are getting and then say, I should be getting $20 million? Because there are pass rushers getting 14, 15. Like Lawson got about 14 and a half or something like that. How can he turn around and say, well, I'm more than a safety, give me $20 million a year? He's not going to get that from anybody. So if he wants to get paid, and presumably he does, he might have to compromise a little bit. But I do think if he's unwilling, then like Frank Clark in 2019, they will have to see what their options are. But if it's not Adams, Danny, what can they do? Because I do think it's worth getting back in this draft, combine or no combine.
Right.
But you can't just have 3 picks.
Looking at their roster, it's tough because I don't want to trade Dwayne Brown. You know what I mean? Like, I want him on that roster. The only guy, I think there's a couple guys. I guess Bobby Wagner, in theory, is a little bit not replaceable, but they have, they did pick a first round linebacker last year in theory to like replace him long term. I don't think they'll do that, but maybe he has the value. But at this point in his career, like, he doesn't have first round value. And so I don't know if you're not going to get back into the first round. And same with Tyler Lockett. I don't think you're going to trade him. I don't think you're going to trade DK Metcalf. He'd be probably your best chip other than Russell Wilson. But they're not trading him.
Well, let's take that second opportunity for a segue and talk briefly about Russell Wilson. I don't want to listen. I get the sense from the abuse that I get on Twitter that people have had enough of the Russell Wilson thing. If you mention anything, even Adam Schefter's now a clickbait artist. So the leading journalist in one of the best journalists in the world is now just after clicks. So speaking of Adam Schefter, let's see what he said this morning on ESPN, and we will react to that.
Where do we stand on the possibility of Russell Wilson being traded out of Seattle? I don't think that possibility should be dismissed, despite the fact that the Seahawks did not engage the Bears. This is a trade that was not going to get done this week at the start of the new league year on March 17th or 18th. This was always a trade that, if it happened, would be the week of or before the NFL draft, after Seahawks general manager John Schneider and his front office have done the necessary work to figure out the quarterback that they would like to replace Russell Wilson with. You're not going to go trade a future Hall of Fame quarterback and not know what you're doing at the quarterback position. That we know that he was fully forthcoming on all the teams that he wanted to go to. You think he showed all his hands, all his colors on those teams? There might be another one or two teams that he didn't list because he doesn't want to show his full hand at that time. I'm not telling you that happened, but I've had people suggest that could be the case. We'll see.
So there we go. There's quite a lot to get into there. I said a quick chat. You can really sum that up in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So the first thing he said, I wish that Adam Schefter would have reported last week that this was always only going to happen before the draft, because it would have saved us a week of drama about the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Maybe even 2 weeks of drama. It certainly seems to me, Danny, like whether people like it or not, the possibility of a Wilson trade is still lingering before the draft or after this season. And the Seahawks could nip this, or Wilson could nip this in the bud right now with a tweet. And they haven't, neither of them have done it.
Yeah.
Tony Pauline, the main man, said on 710 last week and reported with the Pro Football Network that he's been told that the Seahawks are basically ready to move on as much as Russell Wilson is. And I just get the sense that while most people are saying, isn't it great that the Seahawks have appeased Russell with Gerald Everett and Gabe Jackson, that actually what we're seeing here is just a delaying of the inevitable, sadly.
Yeah. So this whole time I've been trying to decide, whether it's just everyone's at home and bored and it's quarantine and we're trying to make up stuff to make this exciting, or if there's something really to this. And everything, if you combine the Schefter reports, Dan Patrick, multiple plugged in people have reported on this now. 5 different people have reported on, well-known, well-sourced reporters have reported on this, and I've heard other stuff off the record, and it all points to this is something that's real. There is a real, I don't know if it's a schism isn't maybe a little bit too strong, but there's definitely some sort of disagreement between the front office and Russell Wilson about what they need to do, and his role and everything. I think he wants to have agency in the way the team is built and the way the direction the team is going. I mean, he sees it's honestly, to me, it's very logical. He sees what the Chiefs are doing. He sees what the Buccaneers were doing. He was sitting there in that luxury suite during the Super Bowl, watching these two teams that have built everything around their quarterback. And, I think it'd be easy for anybody to be this is, again, he might be wrong. Maybe the best situation for him really is to have a team that runs the ball a lot and has spends a lot of money on defense. Maybe that actually is what's best for him. But I think he believes what's best for him is to be on a team like the Chiefs or the Buccaneers, if that makes sense. So I think it's real. I think Russell Wilson really does have a beef with the way that the team has been built, the way the team is going to continue to get built, the way that the team focuses their, what they do, in free agency and the draft, all that stuff. I think it's real. And I don't necessarily believe it's going to lead to I don't think it's going to lead to a trade this year. I don't think he's going to get traded right now, but next year, it would not surprise me if this really actually came to a head.
I think it's going to be very interesting. I still think it could go either way.
Yeah.
I think it's probably 50-50. I think there's, for starters, so what Schefter's essentially saying there is that the Seahawks are going to do their homework on all of the quarterbacks in this class. And Trey Lance had his pro day the other day. John Schneider was there. The others will have their pro days. I've not been following along which ones have had that. Trevor Lawrence obviously had his. They're not going to get him. They're not going to trade with Jacksonville. But Justin Fields, obviously Zach Wilson throws at the end of the month. I would imagine they would want to have a look at Mac Jones, although I'm not quite convinced that he is the kind of player that John Schneider. I mean, when you look at the quarterbacks they've taken,
right?
it's Russell Wilson, Alex Magoo, and they traded for Charlie Whitehurst, that god of a human being. How is he not in the movie now? By the way,
whatever happened to him?
What a star!
Yeah,
I bet he's just brushing his hair.
he's just living his best life right now.
Conditioned hair and beard.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that they will want to look through these guys, and then obviously if they don't like any of them, then that's one option gone. Sam Darnold's name keeps coming up. I just wonder how easy it is. I mean, I don't think you want to get into a situation where you suddenly find yourself in a trade war with other teams for Sam Darnold. I mean, like, if you were to get him as part of a deal,
right,
or if you could get him on the cheap, then fine. But, you know, when there's players like Marcus Mariota's about to be released and Gardner Minshew apparently is available for trade, you kind of think, well, are they any worse than Sam Darnold? And how much cheaper are they going to be? So, and I did a lot of Sam Darnold study. I don't think he's as bad as some people make out. I watched a lot of him last week, just in case. And there's some things to work with there, but I also don't imagine him ever being a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So whether the Seahawks feel like they've got a viable quarterback to move forward with is basically the key to everything here. And if they find a quarterback within this class that they love, then I think the chances of a trade increase. If they don't see anybody that they like, then it's just not going to happen. I think that's indicative of the Bears' offer, which was a bit of a crappy offer when you actually see what it was: 3 firsts, a third, and a couple of players. Well, great. What you just turn into the Bears. You get the Bears draft picks to replace the ones you spent on Jamal Adams. You get a couple of Bears players, and you don't have Russell Wilson. You become literally the Bears. So that, I don't think that was. I think if Pete Carroll was the one who put the kibosh on that, well done, Pete. It's the best thing you've done in ages, because that was not a good deal for the Seahawks. If they can get a Miami or a Carolina involved, or whoever, then, or Philadelphia even, nobody mentions them, then maybe it's a different talking point. I will say this though, Danny, I watched the Trey Lance Pro Day, and despite the best efforts of the NFL Network to make it seem like we were watching Joe Montana in that Pro Day, the number of inaccurate passes that were too high, were wide of the target, that were not accurate downfield, that he just didn't have any real chemistry or rhythm with his receivers. There was one beautiful deep pass, which was absolutely on a dime. But overall, I thought it was a really inconsistent workout. And people were going, oh, he reminds me of Josh Allen. He reminds me of Josh Allen. And then I thought, well, I'll watch the Josh Allen Pro Day again now, and I'll compare.
Yeah.
Josh Allen's Pro Day was a freaking masterclass. I mean, it was perfect. It's probably the best example of a Pro Day you will ever see. And it couldn't be any more different than Trey Lance's. So Trey Lance may well go in the top 5 because he's crafted wonderfully. He has a fantastic physique, great arm, great personality. You can imagine him leading a franchise. But I'm not convinced that if you are the Seahawks and you have Russell Wilson, that you go, okay, that's the guy that we're moving off. And I don't think they will see that with Justin Fields. I don't think the Jets is an option. So I don't think they will even get a sniff at Zach Wilson, who is fantastic. And I mean, I really like Kellen Mond. I also wonder whether or not you draft Kellen Mond to replace Russell Wilson. I don't know. I mean, these are all the kind of things that they're going to have to go through. And I wonder if at the end of the day, what will essentially keep Wilson in Seattle is simply the lack of alternative options this year.
What if they just draft one of these quarterbacks, whether it's Lance or whoever, late in the first round? Say like he falls to the late first round, they trade up or somehow get up into the first round, and then take one of those guys, or maybe in the second round, and then it's just like Russell Wilson takes it as a slight, and then we see Russell Wilson win the MVP, just like Aaron Rodgers did with the Packers last year. Maybe they think this is a great solution to all their problems. Is to just
he reminds me of Jordan Love.
Yeah, I know. Same here. So I don't know. They're not going to do that, I'm guessing, but like, it would not surprise if they took the problem is they only have 3 picks, but maybe they do sign a guy like Mariota and hope they can kind of like revive his career somehow or something like that. But yeah, I mean, they don't have any real answers. If they trade Russell Wilson, it's this massive, massive gamble. And, I think the only thing that would make, Seahawks fans feel good is if they traded for like an established star quarterback already. And that's probably not going to happen either. So I don't know. It's a tough situation.
Florio was sort of tossing out there the idea of the Seahawks trading for Minshew just to bring him in, and then he said even if it's not to start this year, at least you've got someone better than Geno Smith next year, who's had a year in the offense as a worst case scenario. And I'm not totally against something like that, because let's just be right, Geno Smith is not the future of the Seahawks at quarterback. So if you put somebody in there who even has a 10% chance of eventually being the guy, that's better than the 0% chance you've got with Geno Smith right now. So absolutely. It's a plan that makes some success, but we just know what will happen if it just pops up now that the Seahawks have traded for Minshew. We have another 24, 48 hours of drama, wondering that Russell Wilson's going to get traded. And listen, I think it's kind of 50-50, and it will completely depend on whether John Schneider loves any of the guys in the draft enough, though, on top of the fact that if the Dolphins or the Eagles say, yes, actually, we will do this, and then that would be up to Wilson to then go, I'm accepting a trade to Miami. Maybe he would, big market, but they don't have an Andy Reid disciple as an offensive coordinator. I think they've kind of got two lads just having a bash at it. That's kind of what
what are they? What's the plan there? Co-offensive coordinators. What could go wrong?
You two do it. That's kind of what's going on there. And then, the Eagles have got some roots within that Reid, Doug Peterson kind of tree that's come down from Andy Reid, who is maybe he would, but then it's a first-time offensive coach, and he looked like a nervous wreck at his press conference. So he's whether or not he could handle Russell with his demands, I'm not sure. But then apparently the Eagles are looking at quarterbacks and Deshaun Watson and all this. So who knows? I think the thing is, the final point on the Wilson thing before we finish on a bit of draft is that if it was just Jason Lackenfora and Florio and Coward saying this, I'd be more inclined to agree with the people who are sending messages in our thing now, and will no doubt be shouting at us on Twitter and on my blog and everything. Why are you still talking about this? But when someone as credible as Adam Schefter is seemingly giving it as much airtime as he is, Schefter's not a BSer, is he? He's not he's not a rumor monger who pops up and thinks, how can I make the bosses happy today by He's a legit NFL insider with a fantastic reputation. And there's a reason why he ended up breaking the 4 possible trade destinations a few weeks ago. And if Wilson does get traded, I guarantee it'll be Adam Schefter who will break the news in a few weeks. He's not just a guy. He's the guy. He's the guy.
He doesn't. I don't think I can't remember him just throwing out. And he's very careful about how he, words things, about how he reports things. And the fact that he was saying all these things, I think actually, it does lend credibility to the idea. And again, it's not just one guy. It's not just like Florio, for instance, just throwing out these scenarios and then they turn into reports. It's like, these are specific reports from Adam Schefter, who doesn't know whether he does not feel comfortable enough saying Russell Wilson's not going to get traded. I think that's says something. So, I mean, I'm not completely blowing all this stuff off. Again, I do not think he's going to actually get traded, but I do think that there is something to what's going on. It's real, and there is a trouble in paradise, I guess. I don't know how heavy, what word to use.
Here's the thing, Danny. Here's the thing. Even if it doesn't happen this year, it certainly seems like there is an issue. And if that issue doesn't get resolved, then how dysfunctional is 2021 going to be? Are you going to have Team Russ and Team Pete in the locker room, potentially? Yeah. Or is it, and how will it affect performance on the field? I mean, it may just act as a great motivator for Wilson to have the best season of his career, similar to Aaron Rodgers has just had, to prove everybody wrong, to get himself either in a higher placing within the Seahawks franchise, or to get him somewhere else and encourage a few more teams to go for him. It may just really inspire Wilson. And if you watch his videos on his Peloton wearing the Bane mask from the Batman film, he certainly seems to be in a real mission to be in the best physical shape at the moment. But the point I'm kind of making is none of this is good. Whether Schefter ends up saying there's a trade before the draft or just after the draft or before the season or after June 1st, whenever, or if it's next year, it still ends up in the same thing, which is the Seahawks trading away a franchise quarterback Florio keeps saying over and over again, this is his last contract in Seattle one way or the other. So none of this is good news. Like this is the last thing you want. You want of all the players, the franchise quarterback has to be the one who is lockstep with the rest of the team, that is brought in, that is leading the way. None of this is good. Even if you just think this is the biggest load of crap ever, the smoke that needs to be, shoot out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's like early on, like in the Russell Wilson era in Seattle, I remember talking about how, it's the pillars of a Super Bowl team. You have to have the GM, the coach, and the quarterback, and in some cases the ownership. The Seahawks ownership situation is kind of uncertain right now too, I feel like. And so you have to have those four pillars: the ownership, GM, coach, and quarterback all on the same page. If you don't have that, I think it becomes exponentially more difficult to win a Super Bowl. So yeah, I mean, if these guys can't, and winning cures all, honestly. And so like if they go out and kick ass this year and are really good, then maybe this will get all like brushed under the rug and it won't be a big deal. And Russell Wilson will feel that he's being given the chance to be great. But if he continues to feel like he's being held back, whether it's legit or not, like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter what we think. It matters what he thinks, honestly. So, if he feels that he's being held back, he's going to continue to try and force his hand and eventually leave. So I think it's going to be a pivotal season for him and for Russell Wilson and for the Seahawks. And it's going to make it very interesting because I don't think Russell Wilson is all of a sudden going to, not to like knock him, but like become humble. Like the guy, obviously, like all superstars are just vain, glorious people that think they're the greatest player on earth, right? Like that's kind of like
I would say that Russ is a especially bad case of that. Right. As much as I like Russell Wilson, the football player, he's not short of confidence.
Correct. So that's kind of like my point with this whole thing is it doesn't really matter what we think is best for Russell Wilson. It's what he thinks is best for Russell Wilson, and which I guarantee you, he wants to like go out as one of the best all time. And so he wants to be in a situation where he thinks that he's being set up for that. And if he doesn't think that, that he is being set up for greatness in Seattle, then he's going to get out.
Quick reference on this one here from Christopher, suggesting that if the fact that the trade was blocked with the Bears, if that doesn't tell you, I think he means that it can be worked out. Then you're blind to the reality and just buying the drama sold by the TV pundits. I do have to push back on this a little bit. I think it's a little bit rich to accuse people who are listening to people like Adam Schefter saying, I can't rule out there's a trade, as saying that they're blind to reality. When the reality is that 3 weeks ago, Russell Wilson's agent went on the record with Schefter to tell him 4 teams that he'd be willing to be traded to. Weeks after Wilson was complaining about the offensive line, when you have people who are very close to Russell Wilson, such as Colin Cowherd, coming up with a long list of reasons why he's unhappy with Pete Carroll. It's okay to think that this isn't going to happen. I don't think it's okay to accuse people of trying to stir things up or not living in reality, because we acknowledge that this is a story. So I just think it's a little bit naive to think that this isn't something. I hope it doesn't. I hope Russell Wilson spends the next 10 years in Seattle. I'm just not particularly surprised if it doesn't happen. Let's finish. We've done nearly an hour, Danny, and I said half an hour. So I'm very grateful for your time. And I'm a terrible timekeeper. It's just that there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Let's just wrap it up with a bit of draft talk, because you're into the draft. You will have a few names you can throw. Just give us a couple of guys that you like in the draft that you've been watching that you think, yeah, do you know what? Maybe even with a Seahawks slant that you think, I think they'd be good for the Hawks.
So yeah, definitely a couple guys come to mind. And going back to the receiver position, which we kind of talked about early in the show, and being, I think, a need for the Seahawks, a couple guys come to mind. And actually, there's sort of all shapes and sizes of receivers again this year. I think it's going to be a good class. So it kind of depends on what you want. De'Ami Brown and Tylan Wallace, I think if they're in the second round, sitting there in the second round, they have a second round pick, correct?
56.
Okay.
Pretty much the only pick they have got.
Because they trade everything else away, just checking. I think those two guys are kind of interesting, honestly, because so with Wallace, tough guy, he actually reminded me a lot of Curse. And I feel like that might be selling Tylan Wallace a little bit short. But Jermaine Curse came to mind when I watched him, just because he's really good with the ball in the air, very fast on the sideline, contested catch guy, and he's very, very fast. So he's sort of another guy I think that could be on the Seahawks radar just because field stretcher, fits what they want to do. He's very feisty, very competitive. He's constantly getting in other guys' faces. I like that. And then De'Ami Brown from North Carolina I don't know. He's maybe not as twitched up as like a Will Fuller, but he kind of reminded me a little bit of Will Fuller. Who
apparently is going to Miami.
Will Fuller to Miami, huh? Okay, well that makes a lot of sense.
He's signing a 1-year deal with the Dolphins.
That's what we thought. It's going to be a prove it deal because he thinks he can't get enough this year, I'm guessing. So,
well, that's the end of that. No, the off season's finished now. Terrible.
Damn it.
Seahawks rubbish.
Always a pipe dream.
Carol.
Always a pipe dream anyway, I suppose. But I think with Brown and from North Carolina, I think he has kind of like a similar skill set. Very good deep ball. I think he averaged like almost 20 yards per catch in college, which is kind of astounding. And I think he's very sudden in the short area. So those are two guys that kind of interest me in that area. Maybe they go like with an Amon-Ra St. Brown type guy who's like a chains mover, very physical alpha type guy, alpha mentality. Obviously comes from USC, so I'm guessing Carroll still has enough connections there to talk to people there. Those are three receivers that come to mind. Brevin Jordan, they don't need a tight end anymore now, kind of with Gerald Everett signing, but Brevin Jordan is another guy that definitely interests me. He kind of reminds me of Jono Smith. So a lot of tackles, I think. Who do you like at 56?
Oh, have we got another hour?
Yeah. Give me like your top 3.
Oh wow!
If you had to choose,
look, I'll give you some names, and I'll try and limit to it may be more than 3.
Okay,
it's just
fair.
It's like asking my kids not only to have one chocolate. They'll just take 10. So at 56, I think right off the bat, I'm looking to see if there's what the offensive line situation is because it's such a depth of richness there. So I really like Quinn Miners, and the fact that he tested really explosive and he's got long arms and he did so well at the Senior Bowl. It's like tick, tick, tick for the boxes that Seahawks look for. Creed Humphrey had an explosive workout. I'm a bit worried about his arm length. I mean, his hand placement's not great. He doesn't always get it inside. It's kind of like he starts off outside, then in the process of the block, he gets it inside. And he gets away with that in college. I'm not sure he'll get away with the next level, but he combo blocks well, gets to the second level well, like him. Josh Myers, I've kind of got him in the late first. I know a lot of people have him a lot lower than me, but I think he's a great athlete, tall, long, big, consistent. If he was there at 56, then, they're 3 centers. Look, Landon Dickerson, I'm almost like, I think if Darrell Taylor hadn't have happened last year, I'd be banging the table for Landon Dickerson a bit more than I was. But because of the Darrell Taylor thing, and Landon Dickerson's like almost literally been injured every year of his college career, I'm not sure you can go down that road, but he's just a badass, just gets in there, smacks people around. And I just love the idea of getting an alignment that does that. I've already done 4 names and you asked for 3. So
keep it going. Carry on. Keep it going.
Ben Cleveland, who had that great workout yesterday, and now everybody's talking about him. Just
the mountain,
an absolute beast. That is I just want that guy. I'm sick of seeing the Rams toy with the Seahawks in the trenches. I just want to see Big Ben Cleveland out there, giving Aaron Donald a good shoeing. Just get in there.
I love that.
And let's just get after the guy. You want some of this Aaron Donald, do you? Well, is this 350-pound monster who is the strongest guy in the draft? And by the way, he can run a 4.85. I mean, let's just get him in there, and let's have him beating some guys up front. And I know that they've signed Gabe Jackson. That would not deter me from taking Ben Cleveland, even if that means they have to shove Damian Lewis over to center. After all, I would be a compromise to get Big Ben in there, the new Big Ben, because he's the really Big Ben, not just.
He honestly looks like the mountain. He's massive. Yeah,
he's incredible. He kind of carries a pocket knife with him, and he picks his teeth with it when he's had some meat for his lunch. He said some meat. I pick some meat out of my teeth, my knife. Like crocodile. I imagine the knife looks like Crocodile Dundee's knife. Call that a knife? This is a knife. I bet it is. If he hadn't done that, then he's wasting a good knife. Other names like Aaron Banks, I quite like. Not just a ball everyone with offensive linemen. The more that I watched of Kay Johnson, and kind of the Senior Bowl brought me onto him, and then I watched some tape, and then I had a chance to interview him, and he just reminds me of Tyler Lockett in personality. And the thing about him is that he's like, he went to a small school, but he's like best mates with Noah Fant, and he's like surrounded by NFL people. And when I spoke to him, I felt like the best way to describe it is, it was kind of like that presidential feel that Russell Wilson had as a rookie. I kind of felt like I was speaking. I felt like I was speaking to like some kind of world leader or something. That's a stupid comparison. I'm just saying it was quite interesting to speak to a young athlete who was as mature as he was and just completely ready for the pros. He's going to get into a training camp, and nothing is going to surprise him. He's going to be completely at ease with himself in that environment, and I just love that. And I do think he's got some of the traits that Tyler Lockett had. So I'd be well up for him. Dante Smith, I've gone back to offensive lineman. Dante Smith had a fantastic senior ball. I interviewed him as well. He could be really good. Peyton Turner, spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. Really like him. Pass rusher, big size, great size there. I like some of these pass rushers that are in the draft. Let's mix things up a bit. I've got my big database here, so I'm trying to run through the names. Brevin Jordan, I think that was a great call. I like Tommy Tremble just because he annihilates people in the running game. But again, tight ends kind of, he's a if you see him coming, he looks quite kind and pleasant. And then he kind of sneaks up on you and sticks you on your ass. It's like, who's that guy? It's Tommy Tremble.
Tremble is such like a good name too.
That's what the defenders do when they see him coming. They start to tremble.
Tommy Tremble sounds like a Guy Ritchie movie character. I feel like
it does. Yeah. He does not sound like a real person.
Yeah, I love it.
Tommy Tremble. And then to sort of talk about the position that shall not be named. Javonte Williams is I just listen. How can you not like a running back who plows through tackle, sticks a defender down there? Get down.
Carroll definitely loves that guy. You can guarantee it.
Carroll watches tape, right? Yeah, after the free agency, he's going to sit down. He's going to watch a couple of games. He's going to put Javonte Williams on again, and then he'll do another quick. And then for a treat, it's like, Pete, do you want some dessert for your dinner? No, I'm having a Javonte Williams session. That's what it'll be. So Pete is going to love him. I just think he's going to go off the board a lot earlier than people think, and he's not going to be there for the Seahawks. But if he
what
was
about
there,
a Trey Sermon later, or do you have any running backs in the fourth, fifth round?
Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon's one of those. He just promises so much.
Yeah.
And when he's at his best, like at the end of last season, you're thinking
dominant.
Yeah, and then you watch him in the national championship, and he lasted like a snap, and then he's off injured again. You're thinking, yeah. And then at Oklahoma and Ohio State, it was always like, well, he's got the talent, but is he another Chris Carson? Where like 7 weeks into the season, you're thinking, right, we better just manage this guy so he's here for the playoffs, And I think that the guys that I like, I'm not sure the Seahawks will like. So Jamar Jefferson. I quite enjoyed watching him at Oregon State. And the more I watched, the more I was like, yeah. And he's not quite as big as the Seahawks go for, but I just thought I could imagine him starting for a team, or at least sharing the load with the team. And as maybe like a 4th round pick, actually being really good value in that kind of range. I suppose it depends how he tests. Khalil Herbert's really quick and sharp.
Yeah.
I thought as the week went on at the Senior Bowl, his pass protection got better. It's quite rough at first, but then you could see some improvement. So I think he's open to coaching. He's quite an inspiring guy. I like Kenneth Gainwell a lot. Not really in Seattle. I think Kenneth Gainwell in maybe a slightly more imaginative offense might
get him in space, not trying to slam him into the offensive line. Yeah.
That kind of we'll put him in the slot and have him run a route, and then get him moving around. I could see that. Michael Carter's really fun, but again, he's quite small, isn't he? And I think sort of like you've got Javian Hawkins, who's tiny as well, and then you've got Chris Evans, who was the next big thing like 3 years ago, but now is like even Michigan fans like, oh no, you don't want to.
I haven't heard hardly anything about him. Yeah,
if you speak to the Michigan fans, they're all like, nah, you don't want him. But then
that's not a good sign.
But the talk within the league, apparently, that's not like I spoke to anybody. I've just read that. Right. The talk within the league was that the league really liked him and that graded him really highly. I think it was 2 seasons ago, and then he just didn't deliver. But you just don't know if someone thinks I can get that out of him. And how often does it happen? I mean, Chris Carson was a 7th rounder.
Right.
There are guys who fall and end up being productive. But listen, the problem is, Danny, is I like the draft. I like this draft. There are players that I really like, and I hope that the Seahawks haven't just decided to bail completely,
to punt on this draft. Yeah,
just because there wasn't the underwear Olympics, and they haven't quite been able to do all the testing and the meetings that they would have liked. Because I do think that this year you need your sort of Damian Lewis cost $800,000 last year. You do need 2 or 3 of them.
Totally.
And also, once this bit's done, there's the draft, and then there's nothing for months. You kind of want to look forward to the draft. You don't want to look forward to 3 picks. And then imagine waiting all the way to 56, and then they just start trading down so they can get an extra 6th and a 7th. It's like, no, come on.
It's gonna be so brutal.
Which is
like
why
a weird situation.
Which is why, as much as I appreciate, there are some people who get very offended with my Jamal Adams slander. It's not that I dislike Jamal Adams. I think Jamal Adams will be great in some defenses. I'm just not convinced he's a great fit in Seattle. I don't think sort of forcing bare fronts and blitzing Bobby as much as they did to get him open in space and having him be the 53rd ranked safety via PFF. But hey, he got 9.5 sacks because we blitzed him 8 times a game. And that was like 10 times a game right until the end of the year as well.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's worth what they have spent. And if they could get a Frank Clark type deal this year, save $9 million this year and $18 million next year, and use that money and get a couple of cheap guys and just start Marquise Blair, who, I mean, you took Marquise Blair. If you didn't like Marquise Blair, don't bloody take him. You know,
he's a second rounder, right?
You drafted him in the top. You drafted him before DK Metcalf. You know, it's almost like, you know, I feel like a parent again. Like, you wanted that. You asked for that. Eat it. You know.
Yeah. Is anybody going to trade for him though? Like, this is another thing that kind of like weirds me out a little bit about the Jamal Adams trade. Is like, was any other team going to trade 2 first-rounders for him? Like, did they just completely overpay?
I think they overpaid because they were a bit desperate. I think that they thought, we haven't added any impact players to the defense. Quinton Dunbar might be in a Florida prison in a few weeks. We just don't know.
Right.
And he was like our main addition. I find it quite hard to call Benson Mayo a main addition in replacement of Jadeveon Clowney. But so it was like, well, we need to do something. And he happens to be available. And then they rang up the Jets, and the Jets probably just understood Seattle's desperation. And we're like, well, Dallas are offering this. So if you want to do it, you know, I'm not being funny, but I've kind of got to go home. So can you just make an offer now? And Pete, and you can just see Pete was like probably like pacing around his front room going, oh, just give them what they want. And John Schneider's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. Just throw in a third.
Oh,
you know, just get it done. We don't need the picks. You know, you said that the draft's going to be daft next year, so just give them all the picks. It's fine.
Have you figured out how you're going to use them yet? No, we'll figure that out. We'll figure that out later.
It's fine. You know, I'm Pete Carroll, so I don't need to worry about that. So you know, Ken Norton's. I'll get Ken Norton on it. He's a mastermind. So you know, they'll just work on that. I think will anybody trade for Jamal Adams? Is a good question. And I do wonder whether or not, you know, when Rodney Hudson, who's 32, goes for a 3rd rounder, it kind of makes me think, well, there probably may well be a market. And whether that is, and the Belichick defenses need a guy, well, they don't need, but they like a guy like this. So is in Miami, they have 3, not going to trade 3, but they've got 18, probably can't expect.
Trade 2?
Can't expect 18, but they've got 2 second-round picks.
Yeah.
And one of them's right at the start of the 2nd round. And I wonder, you know, could 2 2s do it? Or, you know, the first 2, which is about 33 or 34, I think. And, you know, maybe another 2nd next year or something like that. And then all you've really given up is a 3rd for Jamal Adams for a year, which is what you paid for Jadeveon Clowney, a 3rd last year. You rented Clowney for a year for a 3rd. You rented Sheldon Richardson for a year for the. If you rent Jamal Adams for a year for a 3rd, you've not really lost anything, have you?
Yeah.
It's just 2 2s.
I mean, I think if they made that trade, I'd be excited. I think that tells me everything that I need to know about. Like,
so are you more in line with
I'm feeling about it? Yeah.
Are you more in line with my position on Jamal Adams? Because there are some people who are like, no, Jamal Adams is a superstar. He can't go anywhere.
I'm not there. I'm definitely not there. I'm definitely closer to what you were saying in sense like I don't think he is. It feels like they overpaid. I'm still open-minded that he'll be a bigger impact player for them and their defense. And there were moments there last year where he was like making plays everywhere. And I was like, okay, I kind of get it. But at the same time, it took him it felt like it took him a while to figure out a way that they could actually use him without him being like actually a problem for their defense. You know what I mean? Like there was moments there where he was getting picked on in coverage and stuff. I don't know. If they made a trade, if they got that kind of compensation, I would not be upset about it. I'd probably be pretty excited.
Here we go. Ethan says, y'all. I can't say y'all because I'm British.
Y'all.
So it's you are all tripping. Jamal Adams is the second best player. He's not just a safety. Cam wasn't good in coverage either. Well, yeah, but I'm not being funny. Look, Cam Chancellor took the souls of people. When you played Cam Chancellor and you were a receiver, you were scared to run a crossing route. And any time that Cam, I can imagine Cam, because he was such a big guy, I bet you could hear his footsteps like running across the turf as he was coming towards you, and it probably scared the crap out of you. I'm not being funny. Jamal Adams is not. He shouts a lot and he's quite energetic, but he's not a fearsome hitter or anything like that.
Right.
So, and listen, no, I can't compare Cam, who should be in the Hall of Fame and is a Seahawks legend, to Jamal, I'm afraid. But and Bernard has kind of
also
said what needs to be said.
Chancellor was pretty good in coverage, I feel like. Like,
yeah,
did he say really... Chancellor wasn't good in coverage either? I feel like Chancellor was pretty good in coverage.
You need elite players on defense. J.A. is a great player. I agree they overpaid, though. But that's the thing. Like, if
I agree with that statement. Yeah.
If they'd have just drafted him in the late first or even brought him in as a free agent, it's fine. But when you trade 2 firsts, a third, and a player for him,
and me, you have to pay him whatever he wants.
Huge contract.
Yeah.
When they trade for Jimmy Graham, they had like a 4-year contract or 3 years left on his contract. You know, and when they traded for Percy Harvin, they signed him straight away. With Jamal Adams, it's like, well, you've got to pay him now. You don't know the terms of the deal, and you've put yourself in a bad bargaining position with him because he knows that you've spent all of that on him.
Exactly.
So it's going to be especially expensive. I just don't think. Maybe it's just because we like the draft, Danny.
That's probably part of it. Is like watching the draft is going to be torture, knowing they have 3 selections in the entire thing. I think that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, but. You never know. It feels like whether it's Russell Wilson, Jamal Adams, Bobby Wagner, it just feels like there's a few chapters left of this offseason yet that we will have plenty of time to talk about it. And look, apologies. I've tried to get as many of these messages on the bottom as I have. A lot of them have been put up there. Not many have. Milton Williams, good guy. Spoke to him a few weeks ago. Check that out on the YouTube channel. Ethan's come back. Not a fearsome hitter. Well, what big hits did Jamal Adams do last year? Really, I can't think of. There probably was a decent tackle or a hit or two, but just type Cam Chancellor into YouTube. There's like a whole video with like 20 hits where you have to watch it through your fingers because you're like, oh my god, I forgot about that one. You know, that was he was a different level. Anyway, Danny, I've said half an hour. It's been an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm eternally grateful for your time.
No problem, man. I love doing it. I love talking to you. This is fun.
It was fun. I hope people have enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe and check out all the other videos on there. Lots of streams, lots of prospect interviews that you may have missed. Podcast with Robbie as well. And we are going to be back, I think, on Monday with another live stream with another guest. So stay tuned for that as well. We'll be if anything big happens, I'll be doing a live stream straight away with Robbie, and big things happen all the time when it's the Seahawks at this time of year. So stay tuned for that. Big thank you to Danny Kelly, one of the best.
Thank you, Rob.
One of the best. Great to have Danny with us, and we'll see you next time.